Alrighty. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is having an amazing Friday. So, we're excited because it is going to be warm but rainy this weekend here in Pittsburgh, PA. So, I hope that everyone's doing great. I'm just going to give everybody a second to join in here. So, I hope everyone's doing great. So, let me know where you're from. So if you are new here, welcome to Gloria Horn Sewing Studio. We're located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And today is Fashion Friday with me, John, and Kate over here behind the camera. And today we are going to show you different types of seams. So this is a good building block lesson to apply to later ones. But yeah, so Eastern New Mexico. Oh, wow. I wonder what the weather is like there. It is we've had some interesting weather here lately. So last week we had this little storm come through, and I say little lightly, but 300,000 people lost power. Joni didn't have power for like a whole week. I feel almost guilty because I never lost power. So, did you lose power, Kate?
No.
No. So, but I did have a 40-foot tree in my backyard uproot completely. So that was quite interesting. It didn't fall on the house, it didn't fall on anybody's house. So that's pretty good. So last week we covered different types of hems, and so we showed you how to hem faux leather, how to do a blind hem, a narrow rolled hem, and then also a rolled hem on the serger, and just a basic hem, which I don't have that over here. But today I'm going to show you guys how to do the three main different types of seams that you're going to use with garments. And I do kind of want to jump right into it. So behind me I have three different machines. I have the Brother 3550, the Bernina 570, and the Bernina L890. They're top of the line serger, which I'm excited because I get to be the first person to show it on the live, and I was playing with it a little bit yesterday and I really like what I see. So let's go ahead and get started. So I have a couple different fabrics over here that we're going to start out with. I have some chiffon. This is a very lightweight woven fabric, very sheer. So I'm going to show you guys how to do a French seam with this, but I'm going to show that second. And then I just have some cotton fabric right here, and then I have some blue jean denim over here. So I'm going to start off with just a basic seam. Most of us are familiar with this, but if we just go ahead and we are going to place right sides together, so the printed side of the fabric facing together, and then we're going to pin. So I'm just going to put a couple pins in there. If I'm being honest, sometimes I sew without pins if I just know that it's like a small piece and I could just kind of hold it together. But when sewing clothing, it's important that you line up those notches because you don't want things to misalign. So we're going to come over here to the sewing machine. Alrighty. So I'm going to start out here on the Brother, and I have our 5/8 inch foot on, which is a really nice foot to keep you at that 5/8 inch seam allowance. I really love the 3550. So this is a sewing and combo embroidery machine, and it does have capability with a 6x10 hoop. So this is a great starter machine, I actually say, somebody that's new to embroidery that really wants to get into it. But I'm just going to go ahead and start. I have the knee lift attached. And so we're just going to sew 5/8 inch seam allowance. And depending on your pattern, some patterns for clothing have a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So you'll just want to double check that. But I really love this foot because I'm not going over my seam allowance and I'm just staying nice and lined up. So this is the perfect foot for simplicity patterns. I think I'm going to nickname it the simplicity pattern foot, just since all the simplicity patterns have a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And for somebody that's beginning or just starting out with garment sewing, I think this is one of those perfect feet. You want to make sure whenever you're sewing clothing that you're not accidentally sewing the wrong seam allowance, because 1/8 of an inch can truly change the fit of a garment. So we're going to come back over to the ironing board. And so I'm just going to trim this loose thread right here. And make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and end of all of your seams. Sometimes when I'm showing, I forget to, but you'll want to make sure that you do that. So we're going to press this nice and flat here. I'm just using a little bit of seam. And I'm also using that tailor's clapper. I love this. It really does set the seam. And now I want to talk about the different ways that you can finish this. So there's going to be a couple different ways, and depending on your pattern, they might have you press your seam allowance to one side, which you might press it up. You might press it open. So if we were pressing it open, we would just do that. And that's why I like to use that tailor's clapper. But I'm actually going to press it to the side. So whenever I'm sewing a lot of clothes, especially jackets, I'll usually press the seam flat first and then press it to the side after I serge it. So it's really important we finish those frayed edges. So we're just going to walk over to the serger over here real quick. I was almost forgetting that step. Okay. So this is the Bernina L890, and I've only played with it a little bit, but it's really cool because it's their top of the line serger and cover stitch combo machine, and I just think it's so cool because you can actually go ahead and select the stitch that you want. So if I know I want a number 1 overlock stitch, it's going to tell me all the steps to thread the upper looper, which foot to use, and I just think that it's super cool. So I'll just hit check, and it shows us that 4-thread overlock with that safety seam. I just think it's so cool, and this machine has 2, 3, and 4-thread overlock stitches, so if I was to select, I could just scroll and pick out the one that I want. If I wanted a more narrow overlock, I just think this is so cool. You have a chain stitch, you have the combos, the combo stitches with the overlock and the chain stitch. So actually you could go ahead and sew a seam all in one step. So I just think they're really cool. You also have the cover stitches. So I've never seen a serger with a touch screen, and I just think it's super cool. So it's something new. I really do love my Baby Lock serger, but I do really like this one as well. So, and if you are interested or you're local, feel free, give Steve or I a call at 412-344-2330. I'm more than happy to do a sit-down demo with you, or if you're interested and just have more questions, feel free to give us a call. And so I'm just going to continue on with serging real quick. So I'm just lining up the very edge of that fabric with this guide right here for this serger, and I'm just going to trim off just a teeny bit. So sometimes I do like to trim it down to about like 3/8 of an inch just to make it a little bit smaller. So I kind of just tapered this a little bit. And then we could just chain off and use that thread cutter right there. So we'll come back over to the ironing board. Okay, I'm just going to trim those loose threads real quick. Alrighty, so, and I do have my little mini ironing board too. It might be a little bit easier to see on this. So, we'll take our iron, and I'm going to just press that nice and flat. Pressing is super, super important, especially with making clothes, because it makes it look a lot more professional. You could have the most beautiful fabric, but if you don't press it right, it might look a little wrinkly, it might look not the best. So, and now we're just going to press our seam to one side. So depending on the instructions for whatever garment you're doing, you could press it open. You could finish both sides of the fabric with an overlock. If you don't have an overlocker, you could just use a zigzag stitch, and there is a overcasting stitch usually on most machines. You could also do a bias binding on each side if you were pressing it open, but this is the very basic, and I'm also going to talk about top stitching real quick. So I don't want everybody to get too confused. There's really only 3 types of seams and then different types of top stitching that you could use. So you have your basic, and then there is a flat felled and a French seam. Those are the 3 main ones that I use, but I am going to talk briefly about top stitching. So you could have it just be like this if that's what your pattern instructions call for, but we could also, top stitch a 1/4 inch away. We could edge stitch, which is right along the very edge of that seam. So I'm going to show a 1/4 inch away over here on the baby lock, or I'm sorry, the brother. Alrighty, and with this 5/8 inch foot, I could actually slide this, whoopsies. We could slide this all the way to the side actually to give us a nice 1/4 inch guide just about. So let's go ahead and put that down. And then when I top stitch, I like to increase the length to usually about a 3 to a 3.5, depending on the project. With denim, sometimes I like to go to a 4. It all depends on which type of machine you're sewing, because every brand has a little bit of a different length. So I'm just going to go to a 3 for this one. And then let's just go ahead and sew. So us top stitching, this is holding down the seam allowance. It's not going to go out. The seam allowance will lay down nicely on the inside of the garment, so it's not going to be flopping around. In fact, one of my biggest pet peeves actually is when I buy a t-shirt and there isn't a top stitching around the neckline, because you could see it sometimes start to fold over to the other side. And so that was actually 3/8. I should have moved my needle to the left-right shift just 2 pieces over, but that would have been for a 1/4 of an inch, but that's just still top stitching it down, so now it's not moving out of place. It's nice, it's sturdy, and it's more secure. So that's bringing us to our next seam. And this is one of my favorite seams, so I'm going to show you how to do a French seam. They call this seam a couture seam, and a little buying guide. So I made this blouse over here quite some time ago. If you've been in store, you've probably seen it. And this is out of the same red chiffon that I'm sewing with. And on the inside seams, I did a French seam. So if we're able to see that, I could hold it against the white a little bit here. So a French seam is sewn a little bit differently than our normal seams, because we're actually going to sew wrong sides together, trim, flip it, and then it holds the raw edge on the inside. So, and I also used the rolled hem on this blouse too that we showed last week. So definitely use these two, this week's lesson and last week's lesson, as building blocks for finishes on clothing. So I'm going to just put this over here. And so what I mean by that, when I say we're going to put wrong sides of the fabric together for a French seam, so I have these 2 pieces right here, and we will place the wrong sides together, and then we'll pin. And I'm going to do this on the chiffon actually, because I think it will just be a little bit nicer to show you guys with more of a slippery fabric. So I like to use French seams on chiffon because if you go to use a overlocker on chiffon for the inside seam, it can still fray. It's very easy to fray. I'm just running my finger over it. It's a beautiful lightweight fabric, but you have to be a little bit delicate when sewing it. So, once I pinned that, and I might give a lesson coming up here on cutting out a slippery fabric for a pattern piece, because that was something I struggled with for a long time, and then I learned a couple techniques that makes it very easy. So once we pin, let's go over to the sewing machine real quick. And then I'm just going to sew this. Depending on your pattern, if you had like a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you'd want to sew this at 3/4 of an inch, which is what I'm going to sew it at. And then we're going to trim that inside seam allowance down to 3/8. So you could sew this at a 1/4 of an inch too, if that makes it a little easier for you. It just all does depend on your pattern, because some patterns might tell you sew this directly at a 1/4 of an inch, because they might only have a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. If it's a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I like to sew this inside one at 3/8 and then sew the other one at a 1/4. And with chiffon, we're just being real delicate and just taking our time. We don't want to go too fast. And I also like to use the finest needle that I have, which is usually 7511 when I sew chiffon. If you're using a bigger needle, it can sometimes leave more of a hole or pull the fabric. Sometimes if you have a dress and your heel catches it, it might pull and pull some of those threads, and it will pull it out, and it's kind of noticeable. Have you ever had that happen to you, Kate?
I've not. But
Well,
I've seen it happen to people.
You are very lucky there. And you know what? I want to show this. I just backstitched out of habit, but actually what I like to do when I'm sewing chiffon and I'm at the end of a seam, I like to hit this knot button actually, rather than backstitching to finish that seam so it doesn't pucker it. I usually like to hit it twice. So out of habit, I started backstitching, and I could see that it started puckering a little bit there. So I really love that feature on these machines. It's a perfect way to kind of end off your seam allowance on a very lightweight fabric there. So we're going to come back to the ironing board real quick. And so let's give this a really nice press. Now, if you're using a silk chiffon, do not press with steam. This one is a polyester. When you're using a natural fiber like a silk, you're not supposed to use steam or water directly on it. So we're going to now trim this down to 1/8 of an inch. I don't go all the way to like a 1/16 because that's like right next to the stitching. I think that's not enough for the inside. So I just like to do 1/8. There we go. Get rid of the scraps. And then let's go back over to the ironing mat, and we'll just give this a quick little press. Let's press this to one side too real quick. Oops, don't want to burn myself there. And I'm just kind of pressing it down, and now this is where the magic happens. We are going to press this very gently. I like to make sure that seam is like directly on the edge, that seam allowance. So now we're going to sew this at 1/4 of an inch in cases that raw edge on the inside. So a little buyer's guide here. if you're ever out shopping and you see a piece of clothing with French seams, that usually means that it's a little bit higher quality because it costs a lot more to manufacture clothes with French seams. So, and if you see something with like a chiffon and it's serged on the inside, it's a little bit of a cheaper quality. So sometimes I'm out shopping at Marshall's and I look at the clothes and people say, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm looking at the quality of the finish because I want to know if this is going to last past a couple washes or not." So, alrighty, and we're going to go back to the machine. And I don't think I have the foot by me, but you could use that 1/4 inch seam guide foot. Actually, do I have one? I would love to show them that. If not, there's no worries. I like to use feet that just make it a little bit easier. There is that 1/4 inch quilting foot with the guide. Don't have one by me right now, but I do like to use that just to make sure I'm not going over my seam allowance. So, but instead I'm just going to use the machine. So if I shift the needle, and a little learning fact here. So the center position is for your seam allowances in the back here. And then some people like to change their settings to have the needle start out on the left position, which you will use these seam allowances here. So I'm just going to keep it guided on that end. And I'm going to use that knot button just so it doesn't pucker. I like to hit it twice. Okay, there we go. So now we're sewing that at a 1/4 of an inch, and we're just encasing that raw edge on the inside of that seam allowance. So I'm finishing off just by hitting that knot button twice. So, and what that does is I'm hitting it twice to make a double knot just to make it a little bit extra secure. And let's give this a final press. And this is the emphasis on pressing is just very, very important, especially with clothing, because you don't want wavy seams. You don't want your clothes to look crinkly. I might be a little crazy with it, but I do iron all my clothes every day before work. So, and I get made fun of for that by some of my friends. They say, "Why don't you just toss it in the dryer?" And then we're just coming from the inside and pressing it to whichever side, usually the back of the garment. And so that's your French seam. So this would be the outside of your fabric with the print, and then this would be the inside with the seam casing. So that's a French seam. And then my absolute favorite seam, which is a flat felled seam next. So I like to sew a lot of stuff with denim. I actually have a pair of jeans that I made right here. And so a flat felled seam is very common on especially men's dress shirts, usually on the side seam going all the way from the arm to the bottom of the hem, and usually on jeans. So these ones were sewn with a couple different types of seams. So here's just that regular seam, and I overcasted the edge because I did a little decorative split yoke on the back here. But with this part of the yoke right here, I could show you guys the flat felled seam that I did. So flat felled seams are very durable. So especially with denim and jean jackets, these seams, you know, can go through a lot of wear and tear, and they hold very well, especially like the center back seam here. So almost everybody's jeans will have this type of seam. Unless they are stretch jeans, then they will usually have a chain stitch and overlock. So But I used a couple different types of seams here. These were a pair of Valentino-inspired jeans, so that retailed at $1,800, and I think I made these for a little less than $45. So, alrighty. So we'll take our 2 pieces of denim right here, and we're going to place these right sides together. We will pin real quick, and we're going to sew at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then we're going to come over to the Bernina here, and then we are going to stitch this out at 5/8 of an inch. I'm just on a little bit of an angle here. And so I'm using Bernina foot 1. This one is a little bit narrower than 1C. 1C is the standard that comes with these machines, I believe. So let's sew at 5/8 of an inch, and I'll backstitch. And I just absolutely love the Bernina machines. They could just go through so many heavy layers of denim. When I was playing with the serger next to me, I actually sewed through, I think it was 12 layers of denim with that overlock. And I was just, I didn't get to play with it too much, but it really impressed me. So I was really happy with that. I can't wait to play with it a little bit more coming up here. So let's just go ahead, and then we'll take this back to the ironing board, and we're going to press it flat, set the seam, and then press it open. Okay, so we are going to press this flat first to set the seam, and I really like to press this. Pressing is super important, and using one of these Taylor's clappers really help, especially with a thick, heavyweight denim, just like this. So this is a 14-ounce denim, so that's on the heavier end of denims. And then we're going to press this open. So this is my preferred way of doing a flat felled seam. There is a couple other ways you can do it where you will press both ends at 3/8 and then kind of line them in and pin them with each other. But I find this way to be the absolute easiest. So, and I'm giving this just a really good press. If I was doing it with some shirting material, it might have been a little easier, but I really wanted to show it with denim. So here's the important part. So we're going to have our top end of the seam and the bottom end of the seam. On the bottom end of the seam, we are going to trim this down to 3/8 of an inch. And so I'm just going to use this ruler right here and kind of mark that out. I'm just going to line it up right there. So some might guide you to do exactly to 1/4 of an inch to trim it down. I just prefer 3/8 because it gives you a little bit of wiggle room when you're top stitching it, which you're going to see here shortly. So I'm just going to trim this down just very carefully because we're going to be using this as our folding guide for when we roll over the other side. Okay. So now we're coming back to the ironing board over here, and we trimmed this side down to 3/8. We're going to press it this way. I'm really going to press this one. And this is why I say pressing is just as important as sewing. So having a great iron like these mini Panasonic ones is super important. And now what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this end right around here, and I like to give this a really good press too. And then we're going to fold it this way. So you can do it at 1/4 of an inch, and it makes it a little bit more narrow, which I like to do for shirting if I was making myself a button-down dress shirt. But for denim, I like to keep this at 3/8. It gives me a little bit more wiggle room when I'm top stitching, so I don't have to be right exactly on the side. Because I'm going to top stitch this one with a decorative blue jean thread, but if you were doing like a white dress shirt, you could just have white bobbin thread in, and you could stitch from this side, an edge stitch, and then 1/4 inch away. But let me go ahead and press this. And back at home, I have this little silicone finger thing, and I put it over my index finger so I don't get burnt whenever I'm doing this one. I think we might still have those. I think we sold them a long time ago, but I'll make sure the next show that we have those, because those do come in handy, especially with pressing something like this here. So let's just fold over. Now we're going to press. And I just really do take my time. I try to make sure that this looks beautiful, because I think clothes should look just as beautiful on the inside as the out. That's one of the key aspects of having really quality clothes. And I love making my own stuff. It's really fun to be able to make your own clothes. So that's what honestly got me into sewing here. So I'm just going to keep this pressed. I don't want that top side to untuck. So, and if I'm being honest, you could actually probably even use some By Annie's 1/8 of an inch basting tape to prevent this from flying out. So it's a little easier to keep the press, especially when sewing with a shirting. It's just, this is a very thick denim, so I'm going to just kind of pop a couple pins in from the other side, because we don't want this to unravel. We want it to stay nice and wrapped on the inside. So okay. So let's go ahead and go to the sewing machine real quick. And right here, I am using the Bernina 570. So if you're coming to our spring event, you're going to get to be able to sew with these in Tiffany's room. And I really, really love sewing with these. So she's making a really fun bag. It's going through a couple layers of, quite a couple heavy layers. And she's also going to be sewing a faux leather bottom on the bottom. So it's going to be nice to use these based off the strength. So let's go ahead and we're going to edge stitch 1/8 of an inch right along the edge of that seam right here. So very carefully edge stitching. Okay, so we edge stitched 1/8 of an inch right there, and then this is the part where I say when doing with a really heavyweight denim, I maybe should have used the shirting. It would have stayed a little bit better. So we're gonna just want to make sure that's gonna stay nice and wrapped under there. and we're going to stitch a 1/4 of an inch away. So I'm just lining up the edge of this foot, just stitching with the very edge of the foot right there. And that's a 1/4 inch for this machine. And I'm just going to kind of take a peek and make sure that I'm keeping this wrapped under. So, because that's really important. You don't want it to unravel. That does defeat a little bit of the purpose of the seam. So, but you can see I make mistakes a little bit along the way. It might have been a little easier to show with the shirting, but let's see if I could just get this to turn out here. So, oh, and I forgot to mention, let's increase our stitch length. So on the Bernina right here, we have these little knobs, and when I'm top stitching, especially with blue jeans, I like to go to about a 3.5 to a 4. I really like that you could control all the way down to a 0.5 on that stitch length on the Berninas here. So I'm going to do 3.75. There we go. Okay. I just don't want this unraveling. So I'm curious. I can't see the screen right now while I'm sewing, but what was the most favorite thing that you guys have made, sewing-wise, like garment-wise? I think my favorite thing that I ever made was this denim jacket I made for myself a couple years ago, and I don't have it anymore. I actually made it while I was in high school, and I used to wear it every day to school. So it was my favorite thing that I made. Okay. Here we go. So we stitched our first line here on the edge at 1/8 of an inch, and then we stitch a 1/4 inch away. And with this denim, it did kind of unfold a little bit, so I'm sorry about that. But if we look down here, that's how it should look on the inside. So you would see 3 stitching lines, your seam, and then your 2 rows of top stitching, and it locks that in really nice and firm. So that's why I like to do it. And the reason I like to do the 3/8 is because it gives me a little bit extra room when I'm top stitching that 1/4 of an inch away. Because if we trim it to a 1/4 of an inch, it becomes a little bit more narrow on the inside, I find. And sometimes you miss that when top stitching. So, but if you can master a flat felled seam or a French seam, you are able to sew anything. So, but let's come back over here, and I'm reading some of your comments. So, my wedding dress. Luis, I did not know that you made your wedding dress. That is amazing. Next time you come in, please show me a picture. So, and Troy, you're right. If I did have a stiletto with me, that would have really helped hold it down. So I forgot to bring one over here. But so those were the 3 different types of seams. And just to show one more time with a flat felled seam, this denim was a little bit lighter weight, so it was a lot easier to hold in place. But I go ahead and turn these inside out real quick. Can you show us how to hem dress pants? Teresa, yes, we will be showing some basic alterations coming up here after our spring event. So it's just been a little bit hard with planning everything. And we've been super busy here lately. So, but if we look at this center seam, that is a very nice flat felled seam. I did use a blue thread on the inside because I top stitched with a light beige thread. So, but that's why I like to do that 3/8 of an inch when I trim the bottom part. It just gives me a little bit more wiggle room than a 1/4 of an inch in folding over. Anne-Marie, a tie, my wedding dress, and a vest for my husband. Oh my gosh, Anne-Marie, you showed me the things that you made. You make some very amazing things. So, but that's the 3 different types of seams that I wanted to show you guys today. So, if you had the correct color bobbin thread, couldn't you sew on the wrong side? Nancy, yes, you can. So whenever I'm doing a dress shirt, and let's say I'm just using like a white cotton shirting, and I have white thread in my bobbin and my top thread, I could just stitch from the wrong side. That's a little easier way to do a flat felled seam. But whenever you're doing denim and you're using a top stitching thread, I like to stitch from the right side. So, alrighty. Now I got a couple products I wanted to go through and show everybody today. So, let's start with our absolute favorite. These are just a need be. I have like I think 10 different pairs at my house, and around here we probably have 30 because they do go missing. And Joanne, if you're watching, she dropped off this little bag for me. She said, so all your stuff doesn't go missing, because Kate, how often do I lose stuff here?
Pretty often.
I mean, I lose screwdrivers, I lose snips, I'll lose the thread that I'm using. So I have another little bag I'm going to show coming up here. But definitely get a pair of these snips if you don't have them already. These are just amazing, and they have a little serrated edge. So I like to use these when I'm trimming it in the hoop project or just loose threads or touching up my embroidery. So these are amazing. All right, next is I have my favorite too. I show this every time, is the mini ironing board or a sleeve board. So if you are ironing a dress shirt sleeve, you could easily line it up here. So this isn't for just sewing only, but for keeping your clothes super nice. And I do like to sometimes iron my seams here too. I also have the 20-inch wool pressing bar. So you could actually go ahead and iron your seam on this part. It is a little bit more curved, but you could iron your seam on this part, or you could use it as a clapper too. This is pretty big for a clapper. I do like the little 7-inch one. That's my favorite. So I have the, next up I have, don't know if I have it next to me. Here it is. Okay, so the point turning tool. These I really like, especially I like the ball on the end. So turning a shirt collar or a cuff is actually a lot easier and a little bit safer than using a pair of scissors. I have definitely used to use scissors to turn cuffs and collars, and then I would rip through it or cut through it. So don't use scissors, use a point turning tool. I really like this one because of the ball on the top of it. So it's less likely to break your stitches than some of the other styles that are a little bit sharper. So definitely get one of these if you don't have a point turner. And these are great for in the hoop projects too. When last Friday, I showed us how to make an oval hot pad in IQ Designer. And I used one of these to really nicely point out and go along that curve. So up next is my absolute favorites. These are a must-have if you are sewing clothes, is the Gypsy Quilter Tailor's Clappers. So I have the 7-inch one right here. And then this is the one that I was using today. And then I also have the, what's this one, 12-inch, 11.5. And I joke, I say this one looks like a turkey leg, but it's nice to use this one. Maybe I should have used this with the denim since it is a little bit heavier too. And I could have probably pressed a little bit flatter. So up next is I have the, okay, Kate, do you want to show this with me? So we haven't shown these in a while, but let's make sure that we're keeping our spaces clean, because when we are using a serger, there is a lot of dust that comes around, especially with sewing. So I have this little duster right here. And I try to make sure that I keep the machines nice and clean, especially the sergers.
And
so.
I will say, so I'm constantly cleaning this room because we're always filming in here, and it gets, a little messy at times.
That's
and
my
really
fault,
dusty.
everyone.
I have tons of video equipment, and that attracts dust. So we use these all the time to make sure it's clean and nice in here. So I definitely recommend.
Yes. And I think I stole Tommy's saying here, but I am a little bit of a walking tornado. Kathy came in here yesterday. I was working on something. She's like, there's scraps everywhere. What are you doing? So let's keep our spaces clean. So up next, I have the 8-in-1 pocket tool. So this is nice. So there is a LED flashlight, a LED task light, and 6 screwdrivers. So it looks like we have 3 flat heads and 3 Phillips heads. It's nice to have a little multi-pocket tool. Sometimes when even I'm losing my screwdriver for a serger and I go to the last resort, I do have a couple long ones in my sewing drawer that I sometimes use. So I like this, and you never know if you're trying to tighten something, a bolt on your chair. It's nice to have a little pocket tool with you too, especially in the studio, because more often than not, I hear a bolt and I'm like, what'd this go to? It goes to a table, a chair. So put one in the car. Yes, that is a great idea. So up next is hold the phone. So I think I have these as different color options, right? So it is nice when you're sewing and you want to watch us at Gloria Horn through your phone. So you could set this right up next to your sewing machine on the side, and you could watch us. So I really like these. I think Gloria has one in her car. I don't know if these are the ones that stick on the back. Kate, do you remember?
I'm not 100% sure about these ones, but I will say when we do FaceTime demos, these really come in handy. So I recommend using these for FaceTime if you want to get a better angle of yourself, your machine, so you're able to work on it without having to hold your phone and still be able to see what someone else is doing.
Yes, and you know what? I have used these with FaceTime demos, so if you're ever interested in the machine, and even if you live far away, you could always give Steve or I a call at 412-344-2330, and we're always happy to do a demo with you through FaceTime, however you need. We're always able to offer more information, but these are really nicely. So I could set up my phone right here to the side of the machine if I was going to watch Gloria if I wasn't here today. So I'm curious, what's the funniest place you've watched one of our live streams? I'm going to be honest, was at the gym. I was watching Thursday night. And I was working out with my friend Shelly, and she's like, what are you watching? I was like, I'm watching work. So up next is I have a couple different types of threads. So I'm very keen on always stocking up on thread of different colors, because one easy way to make a little bit of money on the side is definitely hemming dresses come around prom season, and just making sure that you have the right shade for that hem is super important. So up first is I have the summer collection. So you have a really nice rainbow, so purple to red. It's just always great to have a bunch of different colors. And so these are polyester sew-all thread. Then up next is I have the autumn collection, and I really love these shades, especially these two right here for top stitching on denim. So, and then I have the spring collection here in really pretty pastels. So, alrighty. And then up next, I love this. So, if you are like me, and you lose everything, having a little tool bag definitely does help. So this one is the Riley Blake exclusive bundle. So not only is it just a little zipper pouch where it's super cute, bloom where you're planted, that's very, very true, but you get a 45mm rotary cutter in red. You get 4 spools of thread, and this is 100% cotton thread, so great for quilting. And then you also get a pack of sharp Microtex needles. And what's the price on this again, Kate?
$27.95.
$27. That's a great price. I mean, because you'll pay the cost of a rotary cutter alone is, I think, $14.99 if I remember correctly off the top of my head. Plus, you're getting thread and a cute zipper pouch. And this is a limited edition Riley Blake one, so I absolutely love these. So, and don't be like me, maybe start having a little zipper bag for your tools, because I just lose everything. Do I use heavy thread for top stitching denim? Yes, I do. So, all right, up next is I have the Brother and Baby Lock versions of the Laser Beam U plus foot. So if you have one of the 3550 machines behind me, or the 3700D, or the Vesta, or the Flare, so these feet are compatible with both brands, with both Brother and Baby Lock. I do have both versions in the lineup. But this is really nice when doing embroidery. I saw this the other day and I was like, there's a plug in the back. I wonder what that's for. So you can use the needle beam function with this foot, and it does definitely help with positioning. I absolutely love this now. I know a lot of people have gotten this machine behind me for quilt retreats and they love to use it for embroidery. So being able to use the needle beam for positioning definitely does help. So, all right. Up next, since we were talking about sergers, I just have in the lineup here, I think just the red color. But last week when I showed how to do a rolled hem, I did talk about using stretched thread in the upper looper, or I'm sorry, lower looper, if I remember correctly. I can't remember at the moment. But having the stretched thread with the matching serger thread for a rolled hem on the sergers are just really nice, and it's a lot easier to do it with a delicate fabric like a chiffon rather than taking the time and sewing a baby hem. I like to do baby hems on satin, but when I made the blouse that I showed a little earlier, I did a rolled hem for all the flounces, so super important. And then up next is I have the left-handed curved machine embroidery scissors. So I don't think I have the right-handed ones next to me. I forgot to grab those, but I've just been thinking a lot about my left-handed people out there because I still can't get over the cruise. I know I mention it a lot, everybody, but we did have one class where 6 out of 8 people were all left-handed, and I felt so bad that I forgot the left-handed duck bells to pack those. So, alrighty, and then up next is I have the 60 millimeter titanium blades, and I have next to it the 60 millimeter rotary cutter. So Tiffany was cutting out a lot of Bosal for her kits coming up here for the spring event. And I told her, rather than using the 45, use the 60. You could cut through a couple more layers, and it's just definitely nice. I actually have one of every 3 rotary cutters at my house. I really love using the little one, especially when I'm cutting out delicates like a chiffon. I just find that it gives me a lot more control, especially when I'm cutting around a curve or an armhole. So, and then I do have the titanium blades for the 28 millimeter, and I have the 28 millimeter rotary cutter here too. So, and then I know I have the 45 millimeter blades in the lineup too, and I would definitely get that with the exclusive Riley Blake one. So, alrighty, and then up next I have my favorite, so friction pens. I have a 3-pack. So I love these. These erase with heat. I love to use these for marking out notches sometimes rather than making a clip. But I also love just using these for when I'm marking down a certain amount of seam allowance that I'm trimming, or a top stitching guideline. So having friction pens is super important, especially with garment sewing. It just helps you be a little bit more precise when marking out spots, especially for buttonholes. This is my favorite thing to use, is a pen, and I mark out where my buttonhole is going to start and stop. So, alrighty, and then I have a loop turner right here. So if you don't have one too, I know I've been showing this a lot. We're going to have some fun projects coming up here in the next couple months where I'm going to show using a loop turner for straps or spaghetti straps. So it's a lot easier than trying to use a safety pin, which I've done before, and not fun when the safety pin kind of comes undone or rips the fabric or pokes you. So that may or may have not happened to me. And since I did see a comment, do they make a white friction pen? We don't have one, but I do have the Clover white marking pen. So I showed this last week. I absolutely love these, especially when I'm doing something on a black fabric or even a faux leather. I wonder if this one still has the smiley face on it. Nope, the other piece did. But these come off with heat too. Super nice. I absolutely love these. So if you don't have one of these, I think having one of each of these 4 colors is super important. Then over here, I have the Gypsy Quilter 3-in-1 needle threader. So if your machine doesn't have an automatic needle threader or a needle threader built in, these are just super nice. Or even when threading just a hand sewing needle, I really like it. You have 3 different options, and then you also have a built-in cutter so that it will cut that thread for you. I really like that. Up next is the pattern notcher. So super, super important whenever we are working on a pattern and we're adjusting it or we're trimming out our notches. So what I like to do, I don't like to notch outwards. I like to notch a little inwards. So the pattern notcher, what it does is it makes a little 1/4 inch notch. And so if I had a double notch here, that's usually for the back of your armhole. And so I like to notch out just the pattern, not the fabric. And then I would go ahead and I would take my friction pen and I usually just kind of color in the spots for my notch. So that way I could line them up a little bit. If it's a delicate fabric, I don't like to cut inwards on stuff like chiffon. So, and then I have by Annie's double-sided basting tape. So Tiffany uses this a lot. I've been starting to use this a lot. I really, really love it. It's perfect for especially helping out with hemming faux leather right here. So, and holding those seams down. Really love that. And then I have this book right here, Clone Your Clothes. So I'm someone who makes my own patterns. There's a lot of great beginner pattern making techniques here in this book. I can only show a couple pages, but it walks through cloning your clothes. So from measuring it to tracing it to turning it into a pattern and adjusting the fit. I really like it. So if you had a tank top or a skirt you wanted to clone, that's really nice. I really like this book. So probably a little bit later on down here in the road, I might show some beginner pattern making techniques. I don't want to overwhelm us since most of us are starting to learn how to sew clothes, but it's a great book to pick up. And then up next, I have a couple wool pressing mats. So I definitely love these, especially if you have a nice big cutting counter like this and you don't have an iron board set up. These pressing mats are just amazing. So I have 14 1/3 by 18 7/8. And then I also have the 17-inch by 24-inch pressing mat as well. So these are really great. I definitely recommend getting one if you don't have one. So alrighty. Cindy, congratulations that you won a prize yesterday. You will go ahead and I don't know which prize you won. If it was the cooler, I know that it will get shipped to you. So, yep, if you won the cooler, it's going to get shipped to you. Up next, so we haven't shown these in a while, but I love, love, love matching sets. Kate, if you want to show these with me real quick. So we have the Famore Sea Glass embroidery set. So these are really pretty in pastel colors, and it comes in this really nice case. I just love these, especially having those nice embroidery trimming tools. You have the mini duck bell scissors. You have the fine curved scissors. Our favorite are squeezy snips, and look, in pink.
I love that.
I love that. That's so amazing. So, and then you have the scissors with the hook loop in this beautiful little case. So these are really pretty. I love these. But I think what I'm going to get for myself up here is the next one. Famore is in black. I just love having matching things. I have a lot of stuff in my sewing room that's just black furniture. So I really, really love this set right here. So Alrighty. And I wanted Kate to share this one with me, so we're going to open this up real quick. And what we have next here is the kindness bucket list. So I try to do one nice thing every day. I try to compliment one person here every day. I never really announce that to everybody. I know Kate knows, but here's a pair of
Okay, yeah, I
scissors.
can get open.
So Kate and I are both going to pick a card out of this here, but I really like this. I think spreading kindness is very, very important in life because, you know, you might just make somebody's day. So, but this is what we have right here. So it is 52 cards that you can pick from, and it's called the Kindness Bucket List. And you scratch them off. So it's random acts of kindness. So Kate and I are both going to just scratch one off. The adventure key. So do we just scratch?
Pretty sure. You scratch off.
Ah,
one of
okay. I'm scratching the wrong card
yeah,
here.
this is just
okay.
a key showing which type of little like adventure you have to do with each of these cards.
And so we will just scratch this away.
Also, scratching stuff off like this is so satisfying, by the way. Like, when you do, like, scratch-off tickets and stuff.
This is very
It's
therapeutic.
my favorite thing.
Okay, so what do we get? Pop over to an animal shelter and enjoy some playtime with the furry residents. Ask if you could take a dog for a walk. It's a fun way to get some fresh air and make a four-legged friend's day, which I would love to do, but I do have my little Cecilia at home. But maybe one day, Cecilia, I have a little Yorkie back at home. Maybe she'll need a friend. So,
Aww.
do you want to scratch one?
Sure. Okay. All right. So this one says, put your green thumb to work and plant a tree in your backyard, or give your city a call to find out if there's a spot in a public space where you can plant one. It's a fun and eco-friendly way to make a positive impact in your community and contribute to a greener planet, all while soaking up some outdoor vibes.
Yep. Well, you know what? Getting some sun sounds good, and I think I'm fine planting a new tree in my backyard. I saw those Japanese maples on sale actually at Lowe's the other day, and I was like, on sale? There ought to be something wrong with it, but I think I'm going to go back and get one because I've always wanted one in my front yard. But there is other ones in here, I think, where it says, you know, get a coworker a snack, or just say, hey, I like your outfit. And spreading kindness is super important. So I try
agree.
to do.
You never know
one
when
kind
someone's
thing.
having a bad day. So I feel like it's very important to just, you know, say something nice and to brighten their day. And if you're not having the best week, going on little adventures like these could help cheer you up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Alrighty. And I think is that, or I might have just a few more things to show, but I really like that. So spreading positivity is super important. But speaking about sergers, I have right here the Baby Lock Sweet Seam Set. So you get 4 spools of this beautiful pink serger thread, and you get a couple spools of decorative thread right here. And these variegated spools are really pretty. I'd love to see this in the applaud for that wiper stitch. So up next is my absolute favorites, the Famore duckbills. So I use these a lot, especially when trimming seam allowances. I'm surprised I didn't have these next to me today to trim those seam allowances before. And then I have the, yeah, I do want to show those books real quick. So sorry I didn't have those in the lineup, but I have this cute little Baby Lock branded self-tape measurer. So this part here is 2 inches. And so taking your own measurements is really, really easy. So I could take my full chest measurement with the back just by locking that in. And I'm just kind of using the camera to make sure everything's aligned. So use a mirror. And I could see that I'm a 39 chest. So that's really good when taking your own measurements if you don't have a friend with you to compare to the back of a pattern and make sure that you're cutting out the right size. All right. And then I have the 2 Bernina books. So I know I showed 2 of the Bernina machines today, which once again, if you're interested or you want to come in and you're local, feel free, give Steve and I a call. We're more than happy to set up a demo with you if you want to test drive one. But right here, I have the big book of Bernina feet, and it shows all the different feet and how to use them. I don't think I'm allowed to show too much of the book, but I really, really, really love the Bernina feet, and I just want to show one more time. It is like holding a piece of jewelry, so they're all hand polished, is what we were told from our sales rep, and I just love that it's a solid foot. I really love sewing with the Berninas, so they're really cool, especially for sewing those heavy-duty fabrics.
And if I may add, for someone who might be a beginner, especially to a new brand of machine or just starting out on their own, these books would be a great idea. If I were to, since I'm starting out a little bit with sewing and embroidery, if I were to get a Bernina, I feel like I would definitely get these books because it would help you get used to everything from the brand.
And learning and education is the key of the machines, and you guys have us as a resource too, but I do like the books as well sometimes just to reference something. And with the book of decorative stitches for Bernina, it just shows you all the different ones they have, how to program them. The decorative stitches on the Bernina are absolutely beautiful from the ones that Steve sewed out and the ones I've tested. So really, really fun and interesting. So I think that's all I have for today. So thank you all for joining us for this Fashion Friday. I will see you guys again in, I believe, 2-ish weeks. So we're on every other week. It's just we do have our spring event coming up, so I might miss one, but if I do, you'll get 2 back-to-back. So I hope that everyone is having a great day and happy Friday. So